Okay, let's unpack this. You know that feeling, right? Your favorite snack, maybe it's a cookie, maybe something else. It just takes that nosedive straight onto the floor.
Oh, yeah, that split-second panic, the internal debate.
Exactly. Is it okay? Can I grab? Is it still good? That whole rapid fire calculation.
And that leads us right into today's deep dive. We're talking about the, let's call it, infamous 5-second rule.
Or sometimes it's 3 seconds, isn't it? Or maybe 10 if you're feeling, I don't know, adventurous.
Right. It's this kind of food hygiene urban legend. Everyone seems to know it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to dig into the science and the history behind it. Where did this idea even come from?
And we've got quite a bit to draw on actual scientific studies. We've got opinions from food scientists, health inspectors, too.
Yeah, and even how it tops up in, like, movies and culture, so a real mix.
It's funny how ingrained it is, though. It feels like it's been around forever.
Well, maybe not forever, but certainly a long time. If you look at this book, Did You Just Eat That? Great title, by the way. It's by Paul Dawson and Brian Sheldon. They talk about a possible link way, way back. Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan. Really? How does he fit in?
Well, the story goes, at his banquets, there was this sort of Khan rule. If food prepared for the feast fell on the floor, it was considered so special, so valuable, it was still fine to eat, no matter how long it sat there, apparently, as long as Khan gave the okay.
Wow. Okay, so less about germs, more about the status of the food.
Exactly.
Right.
It speaks to a time before we really understood microorganisms, right?
Okay.
As the authors point out, if you couldn't see dirt, you just wiped it off.
Makes sense, I guess, for the time. So when does it start looking more like our rule?
Okay, fast forward quite a bit. The first time something like it seems to show up in print is 1995, a novel called Wanted, Rowing Coach.
A novel? That's random.
I know, right? And get this, it wasn't 5 seconds, it was the 20-second rule.
20 seconds. That's quite a long time. Shows how the numbers definitely shrunk.
Definitely. It makes you wonder how these things just sort of spread and change over time.
Absolutely. And then there's Julia Child. Not a rule per se, but...
Oh, the potato pancake incident. Yes.
Yeah.
1963, her show, The French Chef.
Right, she drops it right on the stovetop.
And her reaction is just so. Julia Child, if you're alone in the kitchen, who is going to see? Picks it up, carries on.
It's that practical, maybe pre-germ theory mindset again. If it looks okay and no one saw.
Yeah, it sort of gives permission, doesn't it? In
Yeah.
a cultural way.
Mm-hmm. And pop culture kept it going, right? Like Osmosis Jones.
Oh yeah, the movie from 2001, the guy eats that gross egg off the floor, citing the 10-second rule.
And it doesn't end well for him, if I remember correctly.
No, definitely not. It's funny how this little idea just keeps resurfacing.
It really does. But okay, stories and anecdotes are one thing. What about actual, science? Did anyone ever really test this?
Yes. Okay, so let's get into the early attempts. One of the first key studies was actually done by a high school student.
A high school student.
Yeah, Jillian Clark. She was doing a summer internship at the University of Illinois, supervised by Meredith Agel.
Okay, interesting. What did she do?
Well, first, she went around campus labs, hallways, dorms, the cafeteria, and swabbed the floors, just to see what was actually there.
Right, baseline microbes. And
Surprisingly, she found very few microorganisms. Agel, her supervisor, was apparently so surprised she had Clark double-check the results.
so floors aren't necessarily crawling with germs.
Well, Agel's thought was that floors are usually pretty dry. And dryness isn't great for a lot of those common foodborne pathogens like Salmonella, E. coli. They need moisture.
Okay, that makes sense. Dryness is hostile. But did they test the transfer?
They did. That was
Yeah.
the next step. They took sterile tiles, some smooth, some rough, and deliberately contaminated them with E. coli.
Okay, control conditions now.
Right. Then they dropped cookies and gummy bears onto these contaminated tiles.
Cookies and gummy bears, good choices. And the big question, did bacteria transfer?
Yes. And crucially, the transfer happened in less than 5 seconds.
Less than 5. So the rule doesn't really hold up, even in principle, under those conditions.
Well, it's important to remember they used a pretty high concentration of bacteria for the experiment, to make sure they could actually measure the transfer. It might not be exactly like your kitchen floor.
Sure, lab conditions versus real life. But still, the speed is notable. Instantaneous, almost.
Pretty much. Clark also did a survey as part of her project. Found lots of people knew the rule, about 70% of women, 56% of men.
And did they use it?
Women were apparently more likely to use it, and, maybe predictably, people were way more willing to save dropped cookies or candy than, say, broccoli.
Haha, yeah, I can believe that. the desirability factor.
Totally. So the early takeaway seems to be, floors might be drier than we think, but if bacteria are present, they can jump onto food really, really fast.
It's that speed aspect that's kind of sobering.
And for this whole project, making people laugh, then making them think Gillian Clark actually won an Ig Nobel Prize in 2004.
The Ig Nobels. Perfect. Research that makes you chuckle, then ponder. That fits.
Definitely fits what we try to do here. But not everyone was convinced, or at least not everyone thought eating dropped food was ever a good idea.
Right. There were definitely voices saying, hold on a second.
Yeah, like Ruth Freshman, who was a spokesperson for the American Dietetic Association. Her take was pretty blunt.
What'd you say?
Basically, don't eat food off the floor, period. Wash it first if you possibly can, but otherwise, just don't.
And her reasoning?
Bacteria are just everywhere. You can't see them. And things like E. coli can cause foodborne illness. But the symptoms might not show up for a day, maybe even a week.
So you wouldn't necessarily connect feeling sick later to that dropped piece of toast from Tuesday.
Exactly. Her advice was simple. Err on the side of safety.
A cautious approach, but understandable given the potential unseen risks.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one perspective. What about people who work with food professionally, like in restaurants?
Yeah, that's a different environment. We heard from Robert Romaine, who was a health inspector for years, over 25 years in San Diego County.
And what was his view from the inside? Does the 5-second rule fly in professional kitchens?
He seemed pretty convinced that nobody in the industry actually believes in it, but there's the economic pressure, right? Food cost. Minimizing waste, so maybe some hesitation to just immediately toss something.
The practicalities versus the ideal. That makes sense.
And he also brought up a point beyond just bacteria. Even if you pick something up super fast and it looks clean, his word was filth. Like hair, dirt, whatever gets trapped in on people's shoes, stuff you don't want to eat, bacteria or not.
Ugh. Yeah, good point. Not exactly appetizing.
And he warned about cross-contamination too, like something from the floor could get onto hands, then onto a counter that was just clean, then onto food.
Right. The floor isn't isolated, things move around.
Exactly. All surfaces, especially floors, should just be considered unclean. That was his bottom line.
It really paints a picture of how easily things can spread, even if you can't see it. Okay, so let's shift again to some more recent, maybe more detailed research.
Yeah, things didn't stop with Gillian Clark's study. In 2007, there was research using salmonella.
Another nasty one. What did they test?
They looked at salmonella on surfaces like wood, tiles, and carpet, and they found this bacteria could survive in dry conditions for a long time.
How long?
Up to 28 days.
Wow, nearly a month. That's persistent.
Virtually, it could still contaminate food they tested, bread and bologna, in under 5 seconds.
Under 5 again, so speed is still key.
And they also found that if the food stayed there longer, like a minute, the contamination level jumped up significantly, like 10-fold.
Okay, so time does matter to some extent in terms of how much bacteria transfers, even if some transfer happens almost instantly.
Exactly. It's not just yes, no, there's a quantity aspect. Then jump forward to 2016, Rutgers University.
Right, I remember hearing about this one. Robin Miranda was the lead researcher.
That's the one. They used a wider range of stuff. Watermelon, gummy candies, bread, and buttered bread.
Covering different moisture levels there.
Precisely. And different surfaces, too. Carpet, tile, stainless steel, wood. They used a bacterium called Enterobacter aerogens related to salmonella.
And their main finding, still fast.
Yep. Their conclusion was pretty stark. Bacterial transfer can be instantaneous. That 5 seconds, it might not offer any real protection.
Instantaneous. Okay. Did moisture make a difference?
Huge difference. The watermelon, being the wettest, picked up way more bacteria than the others.
Which makes total sense, right? Bacteria love moisture. It helps them move.
Definitely. But here's a weird twist they found.
Oh.
Carpet actually transferred fewer bacteria than the steel or tile surfaces.
Really? Carpet? You'd think it would be worse, maybe hold on to stuff.
That was the surprise.
Right.
Their theory was that the uneven, kind of topographical surface of the carpet might actually trap the bacteria, making it harder for them to transfer onto the smooth surface of the food upon contact.
Huh. That's counterintuitive.
Okay.
So surface type is a really big variable.
Absolutely. Which led one of the researchers, Donald Schaffner, to say the 5-second rule is a significant oversimplification.
Yeah, sounds like it. Too many factors involved.
Though it's worth noting one pediatrician criticized the study a bit.
Oh. For what?
For only focusing on floors. pointing out that, things like refrigerator handles, light switches, countertops, those get touched all the time and could be just as contaminated, if not more so.
Good point. The floor isn't the only potential hazard zone in the kitchen or house.
Exactly. It's about the whole environment. Now, just to add another layer of complexity.
Uh-oh, there's more.
A 2014 study, this one from Aston University in the UK, actually suggested there might be some basis for the rule, at least in certain conditions.
Oh, really? Different take.
Well, sort of. Anthony Hilton, who headed microbiology there, said later in 2017 that food dropped for just a moment on a floor that looks clean probably has a minimal risk.
Minimal risk, okay.
But he stressed if the food is moist and it's left there for longer, say over 30 seconds, then it picks up significantly more bacteria.
So again, it's this combination: moisture, time, surface. It's complicated.
Yeah.
No easy answer.
Not at all. It really feels like a it depends situation.
What about, like, the Mythbusters? Didn't they tackle this?
They did. Classic Mythbusters. Their findings, if I recall, suggested time wasn't the main factor.
No. What did they focus on?
More on moisture, the sort of geometry of the surface and where the food was dropped. They didn't find a big difference in bacteria collected just based on contact time alone, within reason.
Interesting. So lining up more with the complexity idea.
Seems so. And then there was another show, Food Detectives,
Yeah.
which seemed to show the opposite, the bacteria cling pretty much immediately.
Right. So even the pop science investigations don't give a single clear answer.
Pretty much reinforces that instantaneous transfer is possible, even if the amount varies.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize all this. What's the overall risk picture? We know there isn't really a scientific consensus on a hard and fast time limit.
No, definitely not. The science points towards complexity rather than a simple rule.
And we need to remember, while most cases of foodborne illness in the US, and there are millions, like 76 million a year, aren't super serious.
Right. Most people recover okay.
A significant number do lead to hospitalization, and tragically, some lead to death,
Yeah.
especially for vulnerable groups.
Yeah, that's crucial. Young kids, older adults, people with compromised immune systems. The risk isn't the same for everyone.
That's a really important point. What might be a tiny risk for a healthy adult could be serious for someone else.
Absolutely. And it's interesting hearing what the researchers themselves think personally.
Like Meredith Agel from that first Illinois study.
Yeah. She apparently admitted she still sometimes picks up food off the floor.
Even after her own research.
But she's quick to add that she knows transfer happens in under 5 seconds. It's acknowledging the reality, I guess.
And Paul Dawson, one of the authors of that book we mentioned.
He had a great analogy. He compared eating off the floor to driving without a seatbelt.
Oh, how so?
The probability of something bad happening on any single occasion might be low. But the potential consequences, if it does happen, can be severe. You might get away with it 99 times, the 100th time.
That's a really effective way to put it. Low probability, high potential impact.
I'm Robin Miranda from the Rutgers study. Her take was very much, it depends.
Right, like the watermelon versus the candy.
Exactly. Watermelon off the floor. For her, that's a definite no-go. Too much moisture, too much risk. A dry gummy candy dropped on a relatively clean surface, maybe, perhaps. It depends on your personal risk tolerance.
It really comes down to assessing multiple factors, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems so.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've gone from Genghis Khan to modern microbiology labs through TV chefs and cartoons.
It's been quite a journey for such a simple rule.
It has. And the big takeaway really seems to be that the 5-second rule is, well, more hope than science.
Yeah.
It's a nice idea, it's a simple guideline, but the reality is much messier.
Yeah. Moisture, surface type, what kind of bacteria might be there, how long the contact is, they all mix together. It's not just about a stopwatch.
And while, for a dry cracker dropped for a split second on a clean floor, the risk might be incredibly low for most people.
The potential for picking up something harmful is real, especially for certain foods, certain surfaces, and definitely for people who are more vulnerable to infection.
So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. Now that you've heard the science, the history, the different expert takes, will it change anything for you?
Yeah, does knowing all this shift your own personal drop rule?
Are you going to be looking more closely at the food, the floor, maybe thinking twice about that dropped piece of fruit? It seems there's definitely more to it than just counting to 5.
It really makes you think about those little everyday risk calculations we all make.
Absolutely. And that's where we'll leave it for this deep dive. We hope this gave you some food for thought. No pun intended. Join us next time as we tackle another common assumption or piece of received wisdom.
Until then, stay curious.